We meet again for another unscripted video. Today I wanted to talk about a particular type of filling mechanism, the Vacumatic. I have one here. Actually, I have 5 Vacumatics. Let me pull them out here. And if you see a theme in these pens, it is because that theme is Parker. Parker invented the Vacumatic filling mechanism with the original pen of the same name. This is a silver pearl Vacumatic. This one's actually from 1946, but they have nice big gold nibs. And what a Vacumatic filling mechanism is that, boy, this blank cap's a little stiff. There's a little plunger at the back of the pen here that when you put it in the ink, it fills. It was an innovative thing when it came out, and I think it should be pointed out that quite a few different types of filling mechanisms already existed by the 1930s, more than people recognize. Let me just show a couple here, if I've got a second. I just happen to have a handful of pens here. So, of course, eyedropper pens have been around since the advent of the fountain pen. This is a Waterman safety. It's an eyedropper, basically the nib's inside, but you pour ink into it, and that's how you fill it. Fairly crude, and it has its drawbacks, of course. So people wanted to develop a way of filling a pen that didn't require you to mess around with the ink so much. So I don't have a lever filler right here. I have some, of course, but I don't have one right on hand. Another one was the Piston Filler, and this one here, this is a Pelican. This is a 400 NN, but the piston design in it is something that has been around for, I think since the advent of the Pelican pen company. But basically, you twist this knob at the bottom and a piston rises up and down, which is kind of like a syringe. So when you crank it out, the piston rises to the end, you put it in the ink, and then you twist it shut, and it draws ink up into it, and it holds a large amount of ink. And I just barely filled this one, or I would show that to you. Another mechanism is what is called a Vac Filler, where basically you have another sort of plunger. You can kind of see it there. You see me moving it in there. When you draw this plunger back by pulling out on this here, it's on a rod. You stick it down in a bottle of ink, and then you push it down. What happens is as it goes down along this narrow part of the barrel, it builds up a vacuum behind it because there's a good seal here. And as soon as it hits this wider portion that you can see clearly here, that vacuum is released and the pen sucks ink up as long as it's inside of an ink bottle. So various filling mechanisms. One of the more obscure is the Vacumatic, because pistons, there's quite a few pistons. The Vac fillers have been, it's fairly obscure too. But these 5 here, being Vacumatics, one of them is inked up right now. It's this one right here. This is, I already started with the Vacumatics, and so this is the silver pearl, and this one is a clear black one. And you can kind of see, one of the things that's so lovely about these Vacumatics is that they have these clear barrel sections that amber over time. So you see kind of an amberish lining there. These are different layers of celluloid, which is basically a clear layer with a colored layer, clear colored. That's the same here, except for the coloring is black. It's straight black without any pearlescence. But you can kind of see what's going on inside there. And I'm going to try this with a flashlight, see if I can get light it up from behind. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, well, that's kind of almost too much light. Let me see if I can turn that down. There we go, that's better. So right in here is a diaphragm, and then you go up into the hollow part of the barrel, and then you can see that tube, that thin tube right there, is the filler tube, and it connects through the feed in, up into the nib here. Anyway, when you press in, sorry, it's old celluloid. This one's from 1945. You see that diaphragm move? It goes in and out. As you push it down, it expels some air, and then when you let it go, it draws up ink, and it will draw it up through that tube. And the more you pump it, the more ink comes in, and it will eventually fill it up. A newer airtight pen will suck it up fairly quickly, maybe 5 pumps. Some take more than that. It just kind of depends. As you can see here, the rod is made out of plastic as well. The early versions were metal, and the very earliest ones were called lockdown fillers, where basically when you were done, you pushed in on this and twisted it, and it locked down, and this cap was much shorter. It was about that long. Anyway, these are the later versions. They're just different. There's nothing better or worse about them. In fact, maybe these are a little more reliable than the old lockdowns were, because the metal could be damaged over time and react with the inks and stuff like that. Anyway, so these are 2 original Vac fillers. This is also a Vac filler, and this one is actually a little bit older than both of those. This one too was made in 45, but it was made in the first quarter of 1945. This is the Venerable Parker 51. It is made out of gray lucite. It has a tiny little gold nib right there, and there shouldn't be any ink in it. Well, maybe there's some residue from water and stuff, because you can't. These are actually rather hard to clean out entirely. But anyway, it is also, like those, a Vac filler, a Vacumatic filler. Gosh, I stopped saying vac. All pens fill, other than eyedroppers. All pens fill with some form of vacuum, whether the vacuum is created by a plunger or a piston or a syringe, whatever it happens to be. This one just is unique. Now, yesterday in the mail, I got this pen. Well, I guess I got this one first. These are Wing Sung 601 fountain pens. That's the model number, is the 601. You can see it right there. 601. And the first model that came out was a black one or a gray one, and this one is full of ink. It's got these ink windows where you can see through, but it has, if you unscrew the blind cap at the back, a very similar setup to the old Parkers, but the plunger is metal, but it works on the same system. And this one actually, I didn't rinse it out. I just filled it with ink. It was already perfectly aligned, and it wrote immediately right out of the box. And it's a nice wet, even though it's this extra fine nib, it writes really well with a nice wet line. And it's been a good daily writer. That's why it usually goes with me in my journal calendar. But yesterday in the mail, I got this clear demonstrator. Also, it's a Wing Sung 601. You can see that there. But because it's a clear demonstrator, you get to see all of the parts, and I can talk about all of them. It's so neat. Now, Parker made clear demonstrators back in the day, and they were made clear so that the salesman could demonstrate them to the retail outlets that were selling the pens to show how they worked. That's why they're so incredibly rare. But the advent of the modern fountain pen craze, everybody likes demonstrators because they like to see what's going on. They like to see how much ink is in the pen, and this one is, to me, is especially fabulous because it's a Vac filler demonstrator that costs less than $20, and it is a little bit better in my view, at least engineering wise, than the old VIF 51s because of 2 things. This right here is a hex nut. So you can remove the filling system without a special tool. You can just get in there with a socket or something like that and remove this if you need to replace the diaphragm. I don't know that this pen will ever warrant that because it's just not that valuable, but it is a possibility. And the other thing is that the section or the cover, the hood over the guts of the collector and the feed to the nib is sealed with the O-ring. Whereas this one, it's sealed with, you have to seal it with glue of some sort, usually shellac, so that it won't leak ink through here. This one has instead an O-ring, and Wingsung has other pens that use the same system. They're aerometric and they're piston fillers, and they work quite well, at least in my experience. This one I have not inked up yet. I have no idea how well it will work, but I thought it would be super cool to see how it works because because it's clear. But anyway, I just wanted to show real quick some of the features of the 51 design. This clear thing inside here, you can see it's got all those tiny, tiny little fins. That is the ink collector, and basically ink from the barrel gets up into the collector and then it gives it a way for it to have a large amount of ink available to the nib that will go down that black feed to the nib itself, and it just works. It helps keep it so that the pen will write right away. It won't dry out, and that if there is a heat differential and a lot of ink wants to come out of the barrel, it has a lot of room to go and expand into before it actually leaks out somewhere. I have never had a 51 leak on me. As long as they were sealed up well at the base of the section here, I've never had one leak. That doesn't mean that I've never had one leak. It just means that if it was sealed, it didn't leak. Because I had some Hero 616s that leaked on me, but that's because they didn't have enough glue at the base. Anyway, I'm going to fill this pen and see how it works. It is obviously an extra fine nib. See how pointy that thing is? It's nicely aligned. The feed and the nib and the section all line up pretty well right through there. That's one of the things you have to check on these pens. Sometimes they're not lined up, but this one came to me perfectly aligned. And it looks like there's enough sealant on the diaphragm here so that nothing should leak backwards out of it when we fill it. So we'll give it a shot here. Take off the blind cap, and we'll pull out. I'm using this. I was at a stationery store and I saw this stuff and it was fairly cheap, so I wanted to try it out just because I thought the bottle was cool. It's not a very efficient bottle for fountain pens because the neck is so small, and it's messy because this gets everywhere. It's silly, fountain pens are kind of a silly hobby. You end up doing things that are kind of ridiculous, I think. Anyway, we're going to go down in here. This pen is narrow enough. Now I saw bubbles. See that? See that spurt of ink? So as the diaphragm goes down, it expels a little bit of air and then draws a little bit of ink. And then each time, oops, I pulled it up too high. It's got to be down in the ink for that to happen. Squirt, 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 squirt. That's cool. It's filling. Well, that's probably good enough. I'm pretty sure that if I were to pump and to wait a little bit longer between pumps, it would have filled better. But let me just clean it off a little bit. So now you can see there's ink all through that collector, and there's a bunch down here in the barrel. It's just neat to see it because I've never seen a demonstrator version of one of these Vac fillers, Vacumatic fillers, where you could see everything like this. That's so awesome. Anyway, it looks kind of messy too. I kind of like that, but see how she writes. Come on. So, even though ink has gone into everything, it hasn't gone through the feed just yet, so it may take a minute or two for it to actually get down to the point of the pen. Come on, you can do it. Gosh, it should have done it since it was down in the ink like that. I wonder what's going on. And that's another thing you can do with these Vac fillers, these Vacumatics, is you can push on the diaphragm a little bit and force some ink out. See, I put a bunch right out there at the tip that should be writing. Oh, that's not good. Makes me wonder if I got some silicone or something on that nib. The ink is just not coming through. Wonder if I have to floss it or something, or if some oils got in there, and that's a possibility. It's one of the reasons why you should always clean these Chinese pens before you use them. Come on. Even dipping it should. I don't know if drying it on the towel did that to it or not. Well, let's see. That little dip should have run out by now. So that's all it needed. It just needed to be moistened at the end, because I dried it out too much when I wiped it with the towel. Anyway, wow. So now you have seen the filling of a Demonstrator Vacumatic. This is the Wingsung 601. These are Parker Vacumatics, that's what they're actually called. And we have a true Parker 51 here. One of the interesting things about these Parker 51s and the knockoffs by Wingsung is that their caps are interchangeable. Not that I would do that. I mean, a nice gold-filled Parker cap, and but they work. I mean, that's how closely they are mimicking or copying each other. How that came about is kind of, I think, as a matter of debate, whether or not the Chinese company had tooling from Parker and license to make these, or if they just clearly copied. I don't know. All I know is that Parker hasn't made these for a very long time, and Wingsung does, and Wingsung does a decent job of it. And this looks like it'll be a good daily writer, nice and fine. And that ink, I've used the ink before, it's quite nice. Anyway, thanks for sitting here, and oh, look how wet that writes. I like that. I like that a lot. It's very smooth for an extra fine. I'm not getting any scratchiness. A lot of these have a very narrow sweet spot when you write with them. See how it's not writing at all, and you turn it, and then it starts writing. But this one has quite a range of movement, but while you can write it with it before it dries out. That's pretty good. Nice. Anyway, so if you want yourself a decent Vacumatic, you don't want to spend the $100+ for one of these vintage pens, I would suggest that, well, either you save up and buy one if you want, but if you want to try one out, these Wingsungs are pretty awesome. They're available on eBay and other retailers from China. This one took me, I think 2 weeks to get to me from China, which isn't too bad. Sometimes they come faster, but anyway. Thanks for sitting and listening through all of this rambling. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.